How many times have you heard the phrase, "You're not listening to me," or "He doesn't understand what I'm trying to say," or "I don't like his tone, I don't like her demeanor"? All of these things are pieces of communication. And no, I'm not going to talk today about marriage. My name is Amanda Althouse, and today I'm going to talk about communication in the workplace. Communication in the workplace is so crucial for the majority of Americans who hold a full-time job. Being able to communicate, interact, and appropriately hold relationships with your coworkers will determine your success in work and your future in the business world. Maya Angelou said that 10% of conflict is due to different opinions, and 90% is due to the delivery and tone of voice. In today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about why it's so important to understand how to effectively communicate in the workplace, how to appropriately communicate with your coworkers and at work, what happens when communication barriers break and things are not going as well as they should, some modern day challenges of communication in the workplace, and how those things are being worked through. So the most important thing to first consider is the term communication competence. And this is basically the understanding of how and when to use appropriate forms of communication. Specifically, communication competence in the workplace is regarding the language, the tone, your cues, which you give off verbally, and you also give off non-verbally, and applying them to the correct situations. And communication competence is extremely important in general, but in regard to the workplace, the way that you are able to not only send communications of various types, but also to be able to receive them, apply them appropriately, is crucial to your workplace. So again, why is this important? It's not just important for us individually to be able to communicate competently in the workplace, but it's important for a workplace itself to have a competent, strong line of communication through all of its employees for multiple reasons. So first, it increases workplace productivity. And a JSTOR journal article in Leadership Choice discusses how when you have a strong line of communication, you have communication competency, you have a lot of collaboration. You have people who are working together who might not always have the same ideas, but have ideas that work, and they run off of these things together to create high productivity. These people are highly motivated, they feel comfortable and confident in this setting, and they feel like they can work together to create and aim for a product that is not only complete but done very well, and just overall motivates those workers more. Communication also allows for relationships to form. So this could be coworkers who become very close friends, strong relationships between a manager and an employee, or even someone way higher up. So if there's a strong line of communication going on, these relationships are developed, and they're also created strongly. So you have a lot of trust, you have a lot of strong relationships, which then ties back into the productivity. The more that the people in the workplace feel connected, feel they can speak to each other, feel like they can run ideas by each other, the better off you will be. If there's a strong line of communication, you're also going to see less conflict. So again, back to that quote by Maya Angelou, a lot of misunderstanding is not necessarily what is being said or differing opinions, but how it's being said. So maybe you say something that somebody takes the wrong way, and now you're in a situation where you have to sit down with a mediator, and that can cause a lot of problems. This also can cause a lot of turnover, which I will also touch on later, but it's really important that the less conflict, the better in a work situation, specifically when it comes to communication, to keep people engaged and keep people employed. And lastly, all of these things tie together to create a stronger culture in the work environment. So the stronger the culture, the more productivity, the better the relationships, the less conflict, all create a stronger culture. In a study done by Forbes, they asked multiple employers what they were looking for in an employee, and a pretty strong answer is communication. So 51% say that this is their top skill that they are seeking when they are looking for a new employee. So somebody who can appropriately communicate is the most important aspect of a potential employee. So now we know what communication competence is. We know why it's important to the workforce. How do we do it? So there are several things. The HR Technologist Forum offers various tips in different skills that you can obtain to create this environment. So the first thing is recognizing everyone is different. I know a lot of people won't take a class where they will learn about communication in the workplace. So one of the things you have to recognize is everybody is different, and this doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but not everybody will read you the way that you read them, and so being mindful that perception, observation is different for everybody is really helpful. First impressions. So first impressions we know are huge. And in a study done, the first impression for a typical employer meeting a potential employee is set within the first 15 seconds of meeting them. So first impressions when you're meeting your employer, first impressions when you're meeting a new employee, working with other people outside of the business, all of these impressions are extremely important. A multicultural approach to communication is huge. Understanding, kind of tying back to everyone is different, that might be because people are from different places, and a multicultural workplace is so important, but it's also important when you're considering how people communicate. Learning how to use a mixture of appropriate verbal and nonverbal skills is also really important when creating this environment. So being mindful of the tone, the language, the word choice that you're using can really affect how people perceive you and how you come across when you're trying to communicate efficiently. The nonverbal cues would be your eye contact, your hand gestures. I put professional appearance, and this is something that the HR technologist said as well, but more than that, also just dressing for your job. It also sends a message about you, the way that you care for yourself, and kind of tying back into that first impression. And then paying close attention to other cues that you can give off, such as personal space and respect of others. All of these tie, pretty strongly into creating a work environment that has a strong line of communication and allows you to work with other people. So what happens if you have a workplace that doesn't have a strong line of communication, that doesn't have communication competency, and people are not understanding each other? It causes all sorts of problems. I would say the first thing to consider is issues between coworkers. So if somebody addresses another coworker and they rub them the wrong way, this could create all sorts of tension and give a work environment that is not conducive to communicating openly and honestly. It can also present issues between staff and management. Maybe you have a manager who is very by the book, and they come across a little harshly. They're a bit abrasive. This can cause employees to be turned off by that and not understand their line of communication and cause all sorts of problems. All of these tie into the miscommunication. Maybe somebody took something you said the wrong way, or you said something, or somebody said something to you and you took it the wrong way. A lot of miscommunication can happen. This turnover rate can be a lot higher when there's not an open line of communication, because people don't feel comfortable. That culture that we talked about is not strong. It's not possible for people to feel like they can talk, like they're being respected, and so turnover would be higher. The culture that we talked about building up in the beginning would be lower, which would cause low collaboration, which in turn goes back to the productivity that I mentioned in the beginning. So low culture, low collaboration, low productivity. Lastly, people feel overwhelmed with the amount of work, overwhelmed with the way that things are being presented, and underappreciated or undersupported. If someone doesn't feel that they can go to their boss and go to their coworker and have these conversations, then they're going to feel undersupported. The alternative board website talks about all sorts of different things that can cause low collaboration and low efficiency in the workplace. And the biggest thing is it just causes miscommunication. And of course, we know that times are changing. So this conversation would have been a lot different about the workplace even 10 years ago. But in today's society, as we deal with the effects of COVID-19, several people have gone remote. The expert market dives a little bit deeper into the challenges of communication in the workplace and how things have shifted as people do different approaches, use more social media, and just use more virtual options. So as you can see, 82% of companies report that staff worked remote. Several people went remote, and several people are going to stay remote. So that's another interesting piece of this communication, is learning how to use these technologies. They talk about Zoom and email and Slack, different platforms that allow for virtual communication. And in order to efficiently communicate, even more so when you're electronic, you don't have the nonverbal cues, you don't have the face-to-face interaction that you had before. So being really aware and cognizant of the way that you word things, your language, your tone, in written communication, additionally in virtual meetings or virtual presentations, it changes a lot of the way that we've seen communication. Another thing to think about is when people come back to the office. So we know that there have been a lot of effects on interaction and communication from being remote. So as people return to the office, how are they going to interact with others? How is the business model going to change? The outlook going to change? All of these things are really important to keep in mind. So not only is it crucial that we learn how to interact with people and communicate with people virtually, also in person, so tying back to everything that we've talked about. So your nonverbal and your verbal cues are really important to keep in mind. Your tone, your language, the way that you interact with someone, giving them their space and their respect, your eye contact and your hand motions and all of these things that tie into the way you communicate really send messages to other people about who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. So the biggest things to keep in mind when discussing how to appropriately create this open communication competence is to be really concise and clear, to the point, show what you're trying to communicate. Keep in mind that everybody is from somewhere different than you are. They have different experiences than you do, so you can't expect somebody to receive a message the same way that you would. Keeping that open line of communication between all coworkers to develop these relationships and to create this collaborative mindset in where everybody is able to work together, keep the communication lines open, and be efficient is so important to the workplace. I think as we move forward and we look at how the workplace is going to change as people stay remote, as we meet people for the first time over the internet, it's critical to the workplace that everyone's on the same page when it comes to communication. It's critical to the relationships between employees and employers and also coworkers. It's also important for businesses and outside sources to have this strong line of communication. So now we know why communication in the workplace is important. We know what happens when there's not a strong line of communication. We know some modern day challenges. And we know some things that we need to do in order to keep the communication lines open and flowing to create a culture that is collaborative and efficient. Thank you.